So this is a course on the type of Hollywood movie that's called film noir, but it's focused on film noir specifically with California settings. Film noir has been set in any number of locations, but I'm going to argue that real noir is California noir because it's set in a far-off romantic place of golden promise and opportunity. Promise and opportunity, maybe. But first, what is film noir? Film noir is a category of Hollywood film first pointed out by French intellectuals. They'd been deprived of American films during the Nazi occupation of France in World War II. And when American movies began flooding back into France in 1946, after the Allied victory, the French were struck by the high quality and dark tone of the new Hollywood crime films. These were not the gangster shoot 'em ups of the 1930s, with their focus on the lower class and on gang violence. French theorists coined the term film noir to describe this new type of American crime film. Film noir were films that were pessimistic about all human character in every class, and posited that even beneath the mundane surface of middle class life, there lurked a world of greed, violence, and lust, a darkness more than night, always ready to break through. It was Freud's civilization and its discontents, repression, holding back passion on film. Such films, emphasizing the darkness beneath the placid surface of middle class life, were not only dark in moral tone, their black and white photography was itself often dark and claustrophobic, with events occurring at night and in dark shadows. Moreover, their protagonists were usually deeply flawed. Gary Cooper once said to a young screenwriter struggling with a Cooper script, "It's simple, make me the hero." But film noir protagonists aren't like that. They're morally compromised or deeply confused. They struggle helplessly against fate or against their own frenzied emotions and inescapable temptations. Often they end up crushed by the social system. They're not your traditional heroes, and this was new. Now, the center of American filmmaking has always been California. There's the perfect light. Scientifically, it's actually brighter here in California than in the East. And there's the hugely varied California landscapes: urban, suburban, mountain, desert, farmland, the spectacular coast, all within easy reach of the Hollywood studios. C.B. DeMille and D.W. Griffith discovered this around 1910. But real noir is California noir, also because it's a product of the especially intense ambitions which the place called California inspires, as well as the disappointment and disillusion it can generate. California, after all, originated as a mythical island of abundance and gold in 16th century Spanish novels. It's this golden ideal that people took serious risks to find, and still do. Joan Didion remarks, quote, "For most of my life, California felt rich to me. That was the point of it. That was the promise. And California was never the place of achievement through patient plodding and the hoarding up of pennies. It was the land of strike it rich, settled, as Joan Didion says, by gamblers, people hoping for the lucky strike, miners becoming millionaires overnight. It's the great power of California that it spreads hope like that. Then, of course, there are the big earthquakes. So the looming possibility of disaster is what makes California noir so noir. The Donner Party, O.J. Simpson and the White Bronco. San Mateo County is one of the richest counties in the world, but 1/6 of its population is on food stamps. California is so real noir that even though 4 of our 6 films are in color, shot in the glorious clear sunlight of the California coast, this merely constitutes an ironic comment on the dark goings-on in the plot you see on screen. And you know, making a movie is not a wise, judicious use of money. It's a gamble. There are so many stocks that are safer investments, more secure. But the temptation with movie making is the chance to strike it rich, the chance for a very big score. The founders of the great Hollywood studios, Jewish immigrants from the East Coast, if not from Eastern Europe itself, played poker weekly together when not making films. They were California gamblers. And they struck it rich not only in the sense of making huge money, but in the possibility of making something really immortal. Double Indemnity, Vertigo, Chinatown. So Hollywood has made California familiar to the entire world. From Double Indemnity, we know the lovely old Spanish-style homes in Pasadena. From Vertigo, we know the first shock at the steepness of the streets in San Francisco. From Sunset Boulevard, we know about Norma Desmond and her decaying mansion. From Chinatown, of course, we know about the additive of sinister corruption in LA's water. You know, there was a secret atomic power experimental station in the hills just above the suburban paradise of the San Fernando Valley when I was growing up. A partial meltdown occurred there in 1959. It has never yet been fully cleaned up. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I only found out about this 2 weeks ago. California Noir. And so to our first film, Double Indemnity. So there's film noir and there's California noir as a special kind of noir because the promise of California is so enormous. Now, Double Indemnity was not one of those crime films that needed to be rescued from obscurity by French intellectuals. Released in 1944, Double Indemnity was immediately nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Billy Wilder, Best Actress, Barbara Stanwyck, Best Cinematography, John Seitz, and Best Screenplay, Billy Wilder again and Raymond Chandler. People point to 2 proto-noirs before Double Indemnity, High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon. Both were made in 1941, both starred Humphrey Bogart, and significantly, both were set in California, Palm Springs for High Sierra, San Francisco for The Maltese Falcon. But the terrific earnings of Double Indemnity and its enormous success d'estime helped unleash a flood of psychological crime thrillers set mostly in the middle class. These films came mostly with a leftist sensibility. I'll be talking more about that. And what they did was invert the flow of traditional Hollywood sentimentality. These films are not sentimental. And invert to the Hollywood strong tradition of happy endings. They don't have that. So to repeat, these films posited that an underworld of greed, violence, and insatiable eroticism lurked underneath the placid surface of American middle-class life, an underworld that could at any time erupt into it. Double Indemnity is, after all, the most fun movie ever made about the insurance business. It's the story of a car insurance salesman on the verge of middle age, joined in plotting a sordid murder by the bored housewife of a boring businessman. Most striking is that the story is based on an actual murder of a husband for insurance. It happened in 1927 in New York, when the bored housewife Ruth Snyder seduced her traveling salesman lover Judd Gray into murdering her husband. The idea was that they'd collect his life insurance money and run off together. The case was famous once, but no more, and I bet that folks in the course had no idea that what's depicted in our film today is grounded in a real murder. In fact, the director Billy Wilder himself didn't know that there was a real crime behind Double Indemnity when he agreed to take up the project. He only learned that there was a real crime later. What happened was that James M. Cain, the author of the novel from which the film was based, had been a crime reporter in New York in the 20s. He'd been at the Snyder Gray trial in 1927, and in 1928 he witnessed both Judd Gray's electrocution by electric chair and then Ruth Snyder's electrocution at Sing Sing. Ruth Snyder was the first woman in the US ever executed by the electric chair. Out of this experience came James M. Cain's novel Double Indemnity, and Cain had already written the equally gruesome The Postman Always Rings Twice, also based essentially on the Snyder Gray murder. But for almost a decade, no Hollywood studio would touch Double Indemnity's story of adultery, greed, and murder, out of fear of the censors at what was called the Production Code Administration. This was the movie industry's private censorship institute, also called the Hays Office. Without their approval, no film was likely to be shown at first-run theaters. So Cain made money on the publication of his dark novels and also became a major Hollywood screenwriter, but his novels couldn't be filmed. In contrast to Cain, our film Double Indemnity was Raymond Chandler's very first screenplay. Chandler's Philip Marlowe novels, starting with The Big Sleep, 1939, they're famous now, but originally they didn't sell well, and Chandler's royalties were tiny. Being hired to do the script of Double Indemnity was a financial godsend to him. It was the Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay for Double Indemnity and the film's success that first brought big sales to Chandler's Philip Marlowe novels as novels, and resulted in 2 films of his work soon being in production. One of those films was The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, a film that itself has become very famous. But it was film first, then novel sales, and then more film that made Chandler's fortune. Double Indemnity's director is Billy Wilder, born Shmuel Wilder, and he himself is an extraordinary California story. Like Jim Cain, Wilder had started out as a crime reporter in Vienna and then in Berlin. He was a liberated product of the Weimar Cultural Revolution of the 1920s, the kind of Jewish cultural figure that drove the Nazis' hatred. He fled Nazi Germany in 1933, smart, and then fled Europe itself. Most of Wilder's family, including his mother, died in the Nazi death camps. Wilder was a successful writer in Germany, and then a successful screenwriter in France too, before he fled Europe for the far-off United States. Like Joan Didion's 49er ancestors coming across the plains, he survived the trauma of the crossing, first the Atlantic to Mexico, and then serious visa problems at the US border. But he eventually got to Golden, California. He arrived in the US in 1934, barely able to speak any English. Like the 1849ers, he was a gambler and an adventurer. Yet he struck it rich, like some of them did, partly through luck, but mostly through brilliance, because he was as successful as a screenwriter here, writing in a foreign language, as he had been successful in France, writing in a foreign language. 5 years after his arrival in Los Angeles with no English, he was already being nominated for an Academy Award as co-writer of the anti-Soviet comedy Ninotchka in 1939. In 1941, he was nominated again for the Academy Award in screenwriting, this time for Hold Back the Dawn. This was a drama about immigrants stranded in Mexico, trying desperately to get visas to enter the US. It was based on his own experience. Now, most screenwriters spend their careers, even successful careers, without ever being nominated for an Academy Award. That was true of the parents of my best friends in high school. But here we have Billy Wilder, someone who entered the country with almost no English, within a few years of his arrival, being nominated for not one, but two Academy Awards as a screenwriter, and moreover, one for comedy, one for drama. Wilder's is a stunning immigrant success story. But then Wilder was evidently a genius. People who knew him said so. He soon graduated into directing, and Double Indemnity was the result. Here's how our film came about, and that's an interesting Hollywood story, too. In 1943, Billy Wilder's friend, the Paramount producer Joe Sistrom, gave Wilder a copy of James Cain's novel, Double Indemnity, and Wilder loved it. He was hooked. Sistrom then introduced Wilder to the Philip Marlowe detective novels of Raymond Chandler, and Wilder instantly loved them. Then Sistrom urged Wilder to take Chandler himself on as the co-screenwriter for Double Indemnity. Nobody remembers Joe Sistrom today, but this was a classic case of Hollywood who knows who. It's how Hollywood worked, and it's how it still works. The film would not be what it is except for Chandler. Cain's dialogue from the novel, when tried out with actual actors, turned out to be too bland for film. The terrific cynical dialogue that so marks Double Indemnity is mostly Chandler's work. Not that Chandler and Wilder got along while they were writing the screenplay together. Chandler was a terrible neurotic and a terrible drunk. Wilder was egocentric and manic. There was a lot of screaming that everybody could hear from the offices. But together, they produced a magnificent script. Okay, so now I want to introduce and discuss briefly the plot of Double Indemnity. I always like to set out the main events of the plot so we're all on the same page during our discussion. So, badly wounded from a gunshot, insurance salesman Walter Neff, played by Fred MacMurray, stumbles at night into his empty Los Angeles office. He records a dictaphone confession for his friend, claims manager Barton Keyes. Most of the rest of the film is then told in flashback, with Walter Keyes' voiceover narrating the events. So, months earlier, Neff, making a routine house call to renew her husband's routine car insurance, met and flirted with Phyllis Dietrichson, played by Barbara Stanwyck. Phyllis asks about taking out a life insurance policy without the husband's knowledge. Suspecting that she's contemplating murder, Neff at first wants no part of it. But he's fascinated with Phyllis, and he likes the idea of making a sudden big score, the California dream. Later, Phyllis visits his apartment, they make love, and he's convinced to do it. They'll have Dietrichson sign a life insurance policy without realizing it, then murder him and make it look like an accident, thus collecting on the policy's double indemnity accident clause for an even higher payout. Walter Neff is a loner with a mediocre life, living in a small apartment. His plot to get rich quickly betrays the only friend he has, his mentor, the honest Barton Keyes. A great performance by Edward G. Robinson. But as Joan Didion says, California itself wasn't created by those who followed the rules, the stodgy stay-at-homes, but by gamblers, adventurers, and ruthless exploiters. Neff is trying to be one. Mr. Dietrichson, who's broken his leg, unknowingly signs the accident policy, which was slipped in with his car insurance renewal. Neff hides in the back seat of Phyllis's car while she drives Dietrichson to a train station. Neff then breaks Dietrichson's neck. He leaves the body in the car with Phyllis and boards the train posing as Dietrichson, complete with a fake plaster cast on his leg and a crutch. A passenger approaches to help him, requiring Neff to keep his hat pulled low and his face averted. But Neff soon jumps off the train at a prearranged spot, where Phillips helps him stage Dietrichson's body on the tracks to look like an accidental fall. Neff's boss, Keyes, an expert at spotting fraud, is suspicious. After all, his job is to prevent the insurance company from paying out money. He's part of that system. Keyes finds it strange that Dietrichson didn't file a claim on his accident policy after breaking his leg. He says it's not suicide because statistically people don't commit suicide by jumping off of trains. So he begins to suspect that Phyllis and some accomplice murdered Dietrichson for the accident insurance money. To Keyes, Dietrichson's failure to file a claim over his broken leg meant he was unaware of the accident policy because, the cynical Keyes says, people always file claims, and this one was justified. But Neff assures Keyes that Dietrichson knew about the policy, and because of their long friendship, the suspicious Keyes accepts Neff's account. Meanwhile, Walter Neff befriends Phyllis's stepdaughter, Lola. Lola says she saw Phyllis trying on mourning clothes before Dietrichson's accident. Lola also believes that Phyllis, who was her mother's nurse during an illness, killed her mother in order to marry Dietrichson in the first place. Lola now fears that Phyllis plans to kill her next to gain possession of the house and the inheritance money. Neff believes it, and he now sees the extent of Phyllis's evil. Keyes actually finds the helpful man from the train, who says that the man he saw on the train was not the Dietrichson in the photos. Keyes is now against any payoff. Neff warns Phyllis against pressing him for it. Neff also insists they not see each other until Keyes ends his investigation in order to avoid suspicion. Neff then discovers that Lola's boyfriend, Nino, is now visiting Phyllis and visiting her every single night. He's caught in her sexual web. He suspects Phyllis will kill Lola and then blame it on Nino, who's Italian. He confronts Phyllis, and Phillips, in turn, shoots him. But when he comes closer and dares her to shoot again, she doesn't. She says she never loved him or anyone, quote, until a minute ago when I couldn't fire that second shot. But as they embrace, Neff has no problem shooting her twice with her own gun. As the badly wounded Neff leaves, he sees Nino and tells him to go back to Lola. Finishing his confession, Neff looks up to see that Keyes is there. When Neff asks how long Keyes has been listening, Keyes responds, long enough. Neff tries to flee, but Keyes says he's so wounded he won't make it to the elevator. Keyes is right. Neff collapses. Keyes calls for an ambulance and the police, and the two men wait for them. Chuckling, Neff says that Keyes wasn't able to solve the Dietrichson case because the culprit was too close, right across the desk. Keyes responds, closer than that, Walter. Walter responds, I love you too. There are obvious implications in that. So let's talk about the production before talking about the meaning. Production is always interesting. Barbara Stanwyck was reluctant to play Phyllis Dietrichson. In 1943, Stanwyck was the highest paid actress in Hollywood, but her hits were mostly as a comic actress. She'd already been nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Stanwyck feared that playing the evil Phyllis would have a negative effect on her career, but the ever-charming Billy Wilder convinced her to do it. Many actors passed on the role of Walter Neff as too grim, including Spencer Tracy. How different Double Indemnity would have looked with chubby All-American Spencer Tracy in the lead. Fred MacMurray was only Billy Wilder's 6th choice to play Walter Neff. MacMurray was used to playing nice guys in light comedies, sort of like Barbara Stanwyck. In 1943, he was the highest paid male actor in Hollywood, again, sort of like Barbara Stanwyck. Like Stanwyck, he was reluctant to take the role, in his case feeling that he lacked the weight to take on such a serious part. McMurray also thought that Paramount Studios, who had him under contract, would never permit him to play such an unsavory role. It would disrupt the friendly image they'd spent a long time and a lot of money crafting for him. But the Paramount executives let him go ahead. McMurray's success in the role came as a surprise to both him and to Paramount, and McMurray later said, "That was the best movie I ever made." And he never made another one like it. Edward G. Robinson, too, was reluctant at first to join the project. It meant taking third billing as Keyes. In 1943, he too was a huge star, but he knew he was growing too old to play leading roles. And this is a theme we'll come back to next week. Robinson agreed to take the role of Keyes in part because he would receive the exact same salary as the two leads and for much fewer shooting days. So honor was satisfied. Double Indemnity's cinematographer, John F. Seitz, is the creative genius who established the film noir visual style, the play of alternating darkness, shadow, and brief light. In Double Indemnity, the moody photography, the fatalism, the leftist social critique, that is, the insurance company, the power of the femme fatale, the deeply flawed male protagonist. This was the first project to bring together all the major elements that constituted the film noir outlook. And it was so successful that it in turn became an archetype and the founder of the film noir movement. Filming in autumn 1943 went smoothly. Wilder brought the project in under budget at a bit under $900,000. This was despite almost half the budget going as salaries to just 4 people, $100,000 each for Stanwyck, for McMurray, and for Robinson, and $70,000 to Wilder himself for writing plus director. Wilder made many brilliant films. We'll see another one next week. But he thought Double Indemnity was his best film, a perfect film, because it had so few script and shooting errors. Now, Paramount was certainly taking a risk in financing a movie of James M. Cain's seedy novel. That's why for 10 years, nobody in Hollywood would touch Cain's novel. Because if the Hays office refused to pass it, the movie would never be allowed to be shown in first-run theaters in the country. That meant a financial disaster. But the censor at the Production Code Administration unaccountably failed to check the lethal boxes marked adultery or illicit sex. Really? He didn't notice? Of course, you don't literally see anything in the film, it's only innuendo. But this allowed Double Indemnity to open in Paramount first-run theaters all over the country in July 1944. And because the Production Code Administration passed it, Double Indemnity loosened the code itself. It's hugely important just for this. It opened the gates for a darker cinema, enabling a flood of code-approved film noirs with big stars, including Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, and finally even James M. Cain's own The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946. Okay. Now to the meaning of the film. I want to start with one of those wonderful accidents that sometimes happens during the making of a film. When Phyllis and Walter dumped the corpse of Mr. Dietrichson on the tracks, they then get in their car and simply drive off. The film crew shot it that way and completed this scene as written in the original shooting script. That was the original version of this sequence. But as Billy Wilder started to leave the location, his own car would not start. Inspired, he instantly ordered the crew back and reshot the scene, with Phyllis now struggling desperately to start the car. What will they do if the car won't start? Both of them have to establish an alibi that they were both someplace else when Dietrichson fell off the train. And the car, it's Phyllis's car. It can't be found near where Dietrichson's corpse is found lying on the tracks. That would be a disaster. Now, as it plays, we, the audience, want them to succeed. That is, we want them to get the car started and drive away. And we're relieved when finally the car starts and they're able to get away. But why do we care so much about a sleazy housewife and a car insurance salesman who's just murdered an elderly, crippled man? I'm going to suggest a dark answer. That is, I'm sure everybody who saw that scene, it was very tense. At the heart of every film noir is a crime. Here in Double Indemnity, the murder of an elderly, dull husband. That's basic. But in many noir films, the audience develops a secret pact with the criminal. I think we have to admit that we in the audience find some of our criminals fascinating. Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity, Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard Next Week. And then when you combine ruthlessness with power, that's even more fascinating. Noah Cross, the ultra-rich murderer in Chinatown, our final film, lays out the basis of the compact between the criminal and the audience. Most people, he tells Jack Nicholson, never have to face the fact that at the right time and at the right place, they're capable of anything. Yes, Noah Cross is a demon, and maybe so is Phyllis Dietrichson, unlike the bourgeois audience, which aren't demons. But we're suspiciously greedy to know the details of the crime and exactly how it works. And we want Phyllis and Walter to get that car started and drive off safely. Perhaps we're fascinated because we do not, cannot, act as they do. Perhaps the audience vicariously enjoys watching the terrible and terribly effective act, the ruthless breaking of normal limits, vicariously identifying, at least in fantasy, with the criminals who can do it and will do it, and do it without a second thought. Maybe this is the real darkness more than night. In short, the wonder of Hollywood is that it mass produces dreams. Films are always dreams. They dissolve between fantasy and reality. In noir, the dream the audience participates in is the dream of untrammeled action. Untrammeled action, especially crime, especially for California noir, the strike-it-rich crime. And of course, socially transgressive sex, in this case, adultery between Phyllis and Walter. We have to remember, too, that originally the audience for these films was a mass of ordinary people sitting together in the dark in a movie theater watching a fantasy of crime on a huge lighted screen. Now, in noir films, there are always consequences to this fantasy. After all, Phyllis ends up dead, and so does Walter. Consequences unless, for instance, you're Noah Cross. Perhaps that points to another reason we allow ourselves to be taken in by noir, to find noir fascinating. It sexes up our own dark suspicions about how the world works. Ordinary people get caught. The rich and powerful, like Noah Cross, or as we'll see in 2 weeks, Gavin Elster in Vertigo, get everything they want. They get away with it. They always get away with it. So I'm talking about why we actually want Walter and Phyllis to escape with the car and make sure the car starts, and we're relieved emotionally when the car starts and they drive off. Why should we care about these murderers? The answer is we identify with them, at least in some way. They do things that we won't do because we're bourgeois. Now, the script that Wilder and Raymond Chandler wrote also underlines the role of fate. The way things play, if salesman Walter Neff hadn't shown up at the Dietrichson's house one day to renew the husband's car insurance, what a dull topic, and met the discontented, sexy housewife Phyllis, the husband would never have been murdered, and Phyllis and Walter would also be alive. Neff, though discontented with his humdrum life, would have gone on, accepting his limits, accompanying and accepting his slow promotion up the ladder at the dull insurance company. And Phyllis might not have killed her husband without meeting Neff. As Phyllis says, I loved you, Walter, and I hated him, but I wasn't going to do anything about it, not until I met you. I only wanted him dead. It took the both of them, and they met by accident. Or maybe she's just lying. Barbara Stanwyck wears a horrible blonde wig, and according to Wilder, the wig was to accompany her sexy anklet and to make her look as phony as possible. The blonde wig wasn't even made for the film. It was an old, dusty Paramount studio prop previously used by Marlene Dietrich. The Paramount production executives were appalled by it. In response, Wilder insisted that the wig was meant to show she's a sleazy character and that all of her emotions, all of them, are as fraudulent as the wig. Double Indemnity was also the first Hollywood crime film to use the flashback and voiceover technique to tell the story. Walter Neff tells the story, and it was an innovation, in flashback via his dictaphone confession to his friend Keyes. The technique originated especially from Raymond Chandler's own crime novels, where the detective Philip Marlowe is always recounting events in his own first-person voice. No flashback or voiceover existed in the original novel by James M. Cain. Cain said, golly, I wish I'd thought of it for Double Indemnity. It's all Chandler. The technique would have a long history, including Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956, which we saw, The Manchurian Candidate, 1962, which we saw, Apocalypse Now, Blade Runner, The Usual Suspects, and Knives Out, 2019. There are two important aspects to this pioneering use of the flashback and voiceover technique. In general, I don't know whether people have thought about this, but film is actually a very authoritarian technology. That is, you can't look just anywhere on the screen. The camera will point you where to look, and it's the director's job to point you where to look with that camera. So with flashbacks, it shows you where to look and underlines the sense of fatalism. We watch events unfold as if they were happening in real time in front of us, even though it's already established that this is the past and this is how they happened and this is how they will turn out. After all, we start out knowing that Walter Neff is fatally wounded. So we have a sense of watching an already determined series of events. Fatalism. Walter, the narrator, speaks in a weary, ironic voice, implying that this is the way it happened. I can't change anything now. It's all fatalism. But second, in Double Indemnity, we're only presented with Walter Neff's version of events. It's his voiceover. It's natural for the audience to accept his version as the dismal truth, since it seems so real, situated by Neff at specific dates and specific places. That sense of everything we see being real, that was Wilder's genius as a director, because of course it's all artificial. But what would Phyllis's version of events look like? We never get to see it, assuming, of course, that we could trust her. But then Phyllis, the femme fatale, whom we could never trust, the siren luring men to their destruction, the triple murderess, Dietrich's wife, Dietrichson, Neff. This Phyllis is, after all, Walter Neff's construction. Perhaps it is a self-serving plea to gain compassion from Keyes, employing the misogyny of 1944. In Double Indemnity, Phyllis's lethal sexual allure is symbolized for us visually by her sexy anklet. Neff is obsessed with that anklet. He refers to it repeatedly. But, like Neff's flashback, the anklet is missing from James M. Cain's original novel. It's an invention of Billy Wilder. The picture of the femme fatale is one we often see in film noir. Those films are usually narrated from the point of view of a male with a huge stake in mystifying the sexual power of such a woman, and thus avoiding his own responsibility for the events. After all, he himself is a flawed character. That's true of the narration of Double Indemnity. After all, even in Walter's narration, Phyllis can't bring herself to finish murdering Walter because she says she loves him. Wouldn't it be nice to have her version of events, like I said? Walter, on the other hand, again, this is his own narration, has no problem shooting her to death. Who's the villain here? In the film, it's the male version of events that is privileged. But who's really behind the Dietrichson murder? Who really wanted to pull it off? Who really wanted the big score? After the 1944 preview of Double Indemnity in a private screening in Los Angeles, in Westwood actually, James M. Cain told Billy Wilder that his film was far better than Cain's own novel and embraced the director. Wilder says Cain kissed him. Wilder makes up stuff like that. But Raymond Chandler, so responsible for the emergence of the hard-boiled detective story, so responsible for the cynical dialogue that made the movie great, snuck away from the preview because he didn't want to be seen with his wife, Sissy, a gray-haired woman 20 years older than him. He feared that someone would ask, "Oh, is this your mother?" The paradox of Hollywood is that its product is reviewed in the arts section, but kept count of in the business section. So in Hollywood, this is something I've said often, follow the money. Double Indemnity made a 143% return on investment for Paramount. Another factor that encouraged studios to make more films like this. Edward G. Robinson so loved his work as Keyes in the film that he urged Jim Cain to write another movie just for Keyes. But at the Academy Awards ceremony in spring 1945, Best Picture went not to Double Indemnity, although it had been nominated, but to Leo McCarey's saccharine Catholic priest film, Going My Way. And Best Screenplay went not to Double Indemnity, but to Leo McCarey again. That's Leo McCarey, who did My Son John later on. Well, the Academy has always loved sentimental pictures with sentimental endings. Wilder, the cynic from Central Europe, was infuriated at this result. The story he told later was that he tried to trip Leo McCarey when the director of Going My Way was going up to the stairs to get his Oscars. But then Billy Wilder was always a teller of tall tales. The next year, though, in spring 1946, it was Wilder who won the Oscars. He won the Oscars simultaneously for Best Film, Best Director, and Best Screenplay, a real trifecta. The film was The Lost Weekend, made in 1945, a film that is a sad and daring depiction of an alcoholic writer. Wilder was originally drawn to this material after having worked with Raymond Chandler on the screenplay for Double Indemnity. He saw that Chandler was an alcoholic and that Chandler's desperate attempts to stop drinking failed because of the stress and the tumultuous relationship with Wilder during the collaboration. Wilder made this film in part to explain Chandler to himself. It's depressing. It's another film noir. Okay. Uh, I do want to start by pointing out something unique about California history that explains the drama of California noir. Uh, California is unique among the states in having an entire series of booms. Of course, there was the gold rush, but then that was followed by the orange rush, which turned Southern California into a vast orange grove. And by 1900 or 1910, the richest county in the country was Riverside County. That was followed by the oil boom, where the center of Los Angeles became one of the great oil producing parts of the world, and where 1/4 of all the oil produced in the planet came from Southern California. And that was followed by the Hollywood boom. And then that was followed by the computer boom and Silicon Valley. And that's now being followed by the AI boom. No state except California has ever had this series of get rich quick booms in such a way. And I think it's one of the things that attracted people to California, attracted immigrants to California. And of course, California is also the only state that has its own California Dreamin' song. Not even Texas has a song like that, let alone Ohio. So all of this makes California a very romantic place. And I mean, if you go outside, it's paradise out here. In Northern California especially, it's just paradise. And over the past month, while I was preparing for the course, I ran into many people who said, yeah, I came from someplace to San Francisco, and I said, I'm never leaving. So there's that aspect of California. And then when you combine it with disappointment, when you combine it with having to have a dull career, when you combine it with the lure of get rich quick, which is what brought people. I haven't run into anybody who, when I said, people who come to California are gamblers. My parents were gamblers too. Nobody says, oh no, we just came because it seemed like the logical result. And sometimes there were, as happens with gambling, failures. The worst example is Richard Nixon's family. His father brought the family to Southern California, to Whittier, to establish a citrus farm during the citrus boom, and it didn't work. He went broke. And that had a huge effect on Richard Nixon's attitude and on his career. So this is, when you gamble, you can lose. And so what you have is the promise, and then the despair at disappointment if the promise doesn't work out. Okay, so that I just wanted to add that too to explain the special intensity of film noir being set in California among all this beauty and all the possibilities. And then, poor Walter, it just doesn't work out for him. And it didn't work out for Phyllis either. And again, I want to say, we don't know Phyllis's side of the story. And she couldn't kill Walter, but he can kill her. So what's going on? That's worth thinking about too. Okay, so let's, if you've got questions, raise your hand. And Lou.
Yes, I want to thank you for a wonderfully fascinating, just incredibly insightful perspectives on this film. this is, we all are very different in our tastes and preferences, but this has long, for my lifetime, been my absolutely favorite film of all time.
Uh,
I saw this film when it came out, and I was 10 years old.
oh my God.
My mother let me
How,
go
how
because
could
it
she
was
let you go and see it?
I was we were living in the Leamington Hotel in a tiny room, and I was bored as hell.
Oh.
And she said, "Son, go see this Fred McMurray film." Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a comedic guy. He was a comedy actor.
Yeah.
And so I saw it. And at the Orpheum Theater, right down in Oakland, was oh, you had to see a vaudeville little act first before the
Right.
film would come on. There was a man came out with a little doggy and he played a banjo or something. And then came this film. And you can imagine as a 10-year-old, I was really, really struck.
Yeah.
I have a question. Um, you know, Walter disliked Nino. There's surely no question about
Yeah.
that. My question is about the close to the final scene when it's the exchange between Nino and Walter at the doorstep, the front door.
Right.
And it seems to not quite be right. I felt very uneasy about this scene because, first of all, Walter disliked Nino, and even though I think he had a soft spot in his heart for Lola, he knew that Nino was poison for Lola, and so here he is with those two thoughts, and I'm asking now, what is Walter's underlying motive in this exchange? Did he really want to protect Nino, he was being observed by police, by the way?
Yeah.
Did he want to protect him from being more deeply involved as the suspect? Did he want to help Lola really by reuniting her with Nino? And maybe did he really want the cops, who he knew were out there in the bushes somewhere, tailing Nino, to see himself? Was he at that point where he might have wanted to surrender and confess everything, of course, as he did? But what was going on is an underlying motive for the protagonist in that scene.
Lou, I'll make it worse. When I first saw this movie, I thought, oh my God, Neff is going after Lola. It's not that he has a soft spot for her. He's in love with her because she's so innocent and pure, the
Okay.
opposite of Phyllis. Uh, so that makes him wanting to send Nino back. But I always thought Nino was just a schlump. It was just not bad, but just dumb. And so Walter is protecting Lola. That's what I thought. But in my heart, I thought he really wanted Lola himself, and that if he could have gotten away with it, he would have switched from the mother to the stepdaughter.
Thank you.
What do you think?
Well, I'm quite confused about that scene. I think Wilder didn't. I don't think that was properly carried out. It's like the ring on the ring finger that the protagonist wore all through the film.
Huh.
I think there were some mistakes, and I don't think that was a good ending.
Tell me about the ring. Golly, I didn't know. You mean he's married or
Oh,
divorced?
this right here is
Yeah.
on Walter Neff's finger through the entire film.
Well, Fred McMurray was married. I guess they. But does that would that mean he was divorced because he's living by himself in that crummy room?
All I know is the ring was there, and
Huh.
the part was as a single man. There was
Huh.
no reference to a wife. I think he had a big knuckle and they couldn't get it off.
Or else it's just part of his dismal uh, development. But yeah, um, I mean, I don't think he's first of all, I want to say 10 years old is very interesting because I was 10 years old when I first saw The Searchers, when my parents took me to see The Searchers. And again, say, oh, it's a John Wayne film, it'd be cool. And that was true with Spielberg and all those later film directors. They all saw it when they were 10 or 11. And that seems to be an age where really smart kids can be hugely impacted by a film that's dark and complex. And so I would say, Lou, you're not alone. And as a 10-year-old, suddenly seeing something, what the hell is this? Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Vicky.
Vicky, you unmute yourself, Vicky. Vicky, you're muted.
I tried to do it earlier and I got muted back. So
you're okay now.
Okay. I have actually, sorry. I have two questions. One is, why do you think McMurray was not nominated when so many others were for the film? And the other has to do with the blonde wig, that awful blonde wig. But I'm wondering first, why was he not? If this was his best film and he felt it was.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they felt Barbara Stanwyck was enough. You know, this is all the internal politics of, I think we have an answer from Joan.
Wait, there we go. Joan always has answers. Be very careful.
What's the answer, Joan?
My answer, I later looked at a couple of reviews and they agreed with me, so I'm obviously right on this. It was 1944. I taught history. 1944 was a really tough time. We're in the middle of war. We're in the middle of war between two different countries that we were really upset with. We needed lightness. We needed good endings. We needed heroes and heroines. We did not need this kind of a film. And we couldn't. I know people who are very bright who don't like a book if they can't find characters that they like in it, or they don't like a film if they don't like the ending or the characters. I say go for how good the film is, how good the book is, but they don't listen. I think it was the times were not, and also, Art, you would know this better than most of us. Wasn't this a real breakthrough film that it brought a whole series of films after it?
Yes.
And I've been reading a 2-volume biography right now of Charles Darwin, and man, did he broke through in such a huge way, and it scared a lot of people. So there's my answer.
Well, I think one can say that although Double Indemnity was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including all the big ones, it only won 1, which was Barbara Stanwyck's, or 2, and also John Seitz. Did not win the big ones, didn't win any of the big ones. And maybe that's because it was experimental and a breakthrough and very dark. But Vicky, that politics would explain why they left out McMurray, but I think he should have been nominated. I do. But you had a second question, Vicky.
That awful blonde wig, I didn't know, was the audience meant to know that it was a wig? And was she in fact wearing a wig as her character, or did they just think that's how she ought to look?
I think they were shocked. You could see that it's not her natural hair.
Yeah.
So it just made her look false from the beginning.
And I wonder if that was the point.
That was it's what Billy Wilder says. The point of the wig was to show that she was a false person.
So she was, as her character, wearing a wig.
Yes.
Okay.
Apparently, they realized the wig was terrible.
Yep.
A part way into the filming, but they couldn't go back and refilm, so they were stuck with a wig.
Yeah.
And I think they probably noticed that maybe too late about the ring. That I think was a mistake also. That was the
big one.
wearing the ring. It was not the character wearing it.
I think Billy Wilder was obsessed not with the wig so much as with the anklet.
Ah.
That was his invention,
Mhm.
and it's a very sexual thing that's going on. And then he he said, well, what's inscribed on the anklet? It's her own name, which is pretty dull, to do. Okay,
Hey, Art.
Jim.
Uh, was Body Heat inspired by this movie in some way? I mean, there's
Oh
some
yeah,
were they
yeah,
looking back to that and trying to recreate parts of that in some way?
yeah. Right. I mean, that's where the femme fatale says to the protagonist, "You're dumb. I like that in a man."
Quite a different ending, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, she gets away with it. She gets away with it. Um, I think it was, and they could get away with a lot more in Body Heat than they could in Double Indemnity.
Yeah.
But it inspires this whole raft of movies like that, and it certainly inspired them to make The Big Sleep at a moment when Lauren Bacall is only 21 years old in that movie, and she's already Humphrey Bogart's real lover, and that had started 2 years earlier. So and the intensity of that, and then once actually they saw the success of Double Indemnity, they went back in The Big Sleep and made the scene where she's talking about horses and riders, which they barely got away with. Depends on how good the jockey is. I like horse riding. Depends on how good the jockey is. They added that because they saw what Double Indemnity got away with. So they went back and added that. Richard.
Unmute, Richard.
When the two characters are just getting to know each other and flirting, um, it seemed to me that there wasn't any money involved from her point of view. Her husband, she said, had lost his wealth, and so she wasn't going to inherit anything. And it wasn't until the insurance salesman brought up the possibility or the concept of double indemnity that there was any money to think about. So to me, it just showed that their dynamic was not so much about money as about the quest of adventure or something like that.
Hmm. I think it's about money, and that's the part of it that is the leftist critique, which Billy Wilder was willing to go with. That the insurance company is only interested in money. They're not interested in justice. They're interested in making as few payouts as possible, and that's what Keyes's job is to make sure that they don't get defrauded. And the basis of that is the belief that almost everybody who files a claim is intent on defrauding the insurance company in order to get money. And that's why Keyes is suspicious when Dietrichson didn't apply for his broken leg. He says, nobody does that. If you really broken your leg, you're going to apply for money. So the greed and striking it rich, especially if you say, well, he'd lost his money, so what does Dietrichson, what does Phyllis have to go with? Double indemnity. That's a way to get money. That means she killed the wife in order to get Dietrichson's money, and then he went broke. Poor her. So she needed to find a way to do that. But they still had that house, which was a really nice house, I thought. So, yeah, but I think greed and actually survival this is going to come up in Sunset Boulevard too, that people are desperate simply to survive when there's no safety net, no social safety net beneath them, that leads them to do ruthless things.
The other thing that struck me about the characters as a psychiatrist
Yeah.
is how unlikable all of them are, with the exception of Edward G. Robinson. There's something in an old concept in psychiatry called neurotic warmth.
What is that?
It's where the person that you're talking about radiates concern for others and engagement with others, and empathy, capacity for empathy with others. And none of these characters showed any of those qualities. They were all cold fish.
Yeah. Yeah. At the very end of, I think that's right. They're cold, dislikable characters, which is one reason why Paramount was reluctant to make the movie in the first place, and why it took 10 years for any studio to try to make a movie of the novel. On the other hand, what do you make of I Love You Too at the end? Closer than that, Walter. And Walter says, I love you too, to Edward Robinson. What's that about?
Say, Art, Dolores has a question now.
Dolores, yes.
Yeah, in answer to that, I think they did love each other, and you couldn't talk about gay relationships back then or anything. Remember, he
No.
wasn't married. Could be why. And there's another reason for wearing the ring. I would suspect that he wore the ring because as an insurance salesman, if he walked in somewhere to someone's house, it would make them calmer by the fact that he had a ring on.
More
Assuming he was
stable.
married. Yeah, more stable. More stable. More stable.
Yeah.
When I first saw her come down the stairs with a wig on, I thought she was like right out of the Black Widow. And later on, when the Lola said, oh, she was the nurse, I thought she probably had a long history of this kind of thing and had done stuff like that before. And then she got herself into a dead end with this guy, and she couldn't figure out how to get out on this one because the guy didn't have the money, she thought. So then when the insurance guy came along, she thought, okay, we can do it this way then. So,
but this is, that's how people are supposed to think about it. But I also, this is Walter's version.
Yeah, no, I didn't have Walter's version because I thought she was the Black Widow from the very beginning. Before
From the very beginning.
Yeah, oh yeah.
There's a movie called Black Widow that's like that.
Yeah. Well, somewhat like that, yeah. Except I don't believe in the end that Black Widow comes across Deborah Winger, who's a
right.
Who exposes her. But
so you think that Phyllis had a long history of?
Oh, I think she had a long history. Yeah, it started. It was probably way before the nursing, and when she had that wig on, I thought, well, maybe she wore that wig because that's like, her next persona, right?
But again, what that suggests is the need for survival, and she's willing to do anything for economic survival.
Absolutely, and she got to the point where her husband, now she was cornered.
Yeah,
she didn't have the money. She couldn't even buy the hats she wanted.
She made a bad bet.
She made a bad bet on the guy, and then in walks the insurance salesman, and she goes, "Okay, how can I manipulate him into this?" And so actually, I saw it from both of their perspectives on that. And I think it's nice they put in one good person, which was Lola. So they had her; she was fine. And I agree with you. There was something very sinister about him spending all that time with Lola.
I agree. I really agree. Yeah,
that was decadent.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Susan.
Unmute, Susan. Susan, please unmute. Sorry, I can't do it.
There
That's
you
okay?
go. Yeah.
This is trivial compared with the conversations you've been having. I want to go back to the ankle bracelet.
Yeah.
It seems to me you're making a bit much of it because I was 12 years old in 1944. And ankle bracelets were very much at the style, and I desperately wanted one. And my mother thought that they were, quote, cheap.
Yes.
So the fact that she had one to me is no big deal.
No, it
A
shows
woman-
she's cheap.
Okay,
It
so
shows-
she's cheap, but so what? I mean, it's not symbolic, I don't think. That's just the way I look at ankle bracelets. I coveted one in the major way and couldn't
Did you
have
get
one.
one?
No, I never did have one. And I see them now.
Yeah,
They're back.
yeah.
No, I went to a Catholic all girls school, and we weren't allowed to have ankle
No,
bracelets.
I went to a girls' school too. Yeah, exactly. But my parents would never have allowed it. So I think there's little symbolism. It's just what young women were wearing in those days.
Well, it sounds to me that it has pretty heavy symbolism if Catholic girls' schools not allowing them to wear it.
Well, that was part of the uniform thing. I went to a girls' school.
Yeah.
Like Catholic schools, we were required to wear a god-awful navy blue serge jumper over a white shirt with a gray blazer. Horrible,
yeah.
just awful. And no lipstick. We were not allowed to wear lipstick.
But we could wear earrings. We could wear earrings if they were crosses.
Oh my goodness.
I think that the question about the ankle bracelet is very interesting, Susan. That if it's a cheap thing, see, this is what happens. This is like 60, 70 years ago. What was the belief when people saw that ankle bracelet? Did it mean that Fred McMurray's character was attracted to something cheap? Did it mean that she thought it was
No, Mark, I'm talking about my parents thinking it was cheap. That is not a universal thing at all.
Oh, no?
Oh, I thought it was cheap. As soon as I saw it, I thought it was cheap.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah, and I think we ought to find out, like what did people, I do a lot of stuff with Dickens, and I'm always interested in what did the audience really understand about those times, and we take meaning from our own time to try to, give value to things. But maybe it was clearly understood in 1944 that this was a cheap thing that both of them were responding to.
Okay, that could be. I hadn't thought of it that way.
Or you can have both of them, Susan. It was a fad, but she's going along with the fad, and it does make her cheap.
To me, it was at that age. It was glamorous. To me, it was glamorous and
Glamorous.
and forbidden, which was even better.
Oh,
And the fact that it had her name, if I'd had one, it would have had my name on it.
really?
Yes. What else would it have on it?
A 12-year-old, right?
Well,
What else would it have?
Wow.
What? But what did you expect to have on it?
Some gushy sentiment.
Oh, yeah. I think there were both. My guess is if you go on eBay, I'll bet you could find a 1944 ankle bracelet in both categories.
That would be fascinating.
Would be, wouldn't it? Maybe I'll try that.
Why don't you do that?
If you had a boyfriend, it would have said so and so plus so and so on your bracelet.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Exactly.
Except they cost money, so you had to be really
Oh
careful.
yeah. Initials maybe.
But hers certainly doesn't say me plus my husband.
No.
Mhm.
isn't it something young girls wear? Isn't it for 13 and 14-year-old girls now? Wouldn't they be wearing these days, if anybody?
Yeah, they have other. Yeah, I mean, they wear whatever's in.
Yeah.
Whatever's in.
Earphones.
They have ankle bracelet tattoos.
Well, I think
Oh my God. Oh my God.
they have ankle bracelets now. I have a friend here where we live in our neighborhood who's in her 70s, and she wears kind of an ankle bracelet.
Wow.
My.
Well, that fits.
I have a kind of a
Well-
prejudice against them because my parents beat it into me, but
This is your chance to get one. Just go.
good point. Good, or make one. I could make one.
Art, Lori,
I'm a needle person. I could make one.
Lori has a question, Art.
Yeah, Lori.
Yeah, unmute it. Lori, please unmute.
And then we'll get to Richard again.
There you
Hi.
go.
Okay.
Well, my opinion is that the ankle bracelet, because it was an addition by Wilder and because it was mentioned so many times, in the film is that it certainly wasn't just a case of that was the fashion at the time. I think that it was meant to be in some way seductive.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. But I'm interested in the question of how the audience at that time viewed certain aspects of the film, because we can't help but look at it through our own eyes now.
Yeah.
I have a few questions in that regard. What would that audience at that time have had thought of the I love you too thing? Like, what would they have thought of that? What did critics write about that, if anything? And the other is that watching it through the eyes of 2026, you see the racism in the film. You know, everybody important is white. Everybody who's fixing the car or whatever is black. And Nino, what did the audience at the time, did they just sort of accept, yeah, a guy with an Italian name is probably a bad guy, or we can just we won't challenge that thought. So I'm interested in those questions.
I think I was surprised that they chose an Italian boyfriend for Lola. I think anybody in that period would have thought it was sinister. That he had a dubious background, that he might have been a thug of some sort.
Because he was Italian.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were at war with Italy, by the way.
Well, they had become our allies by 44, actually. But yes, there had been a long history of that. You know, actually, Joe DiMaggio's father he was a fisherman, and he was prevented from pursuing being a fisherman off of San Francisco Bay because they considered him an enemy alien. So he lost his business as a result. So a lot of that kind of thing that was going on, leaving aside the mafia stuff. Yeah. Richard, I think you had another comment.
With regard to the use of the word love between the men at the time, I can imagine it struck a lot of people in the audience as perverted, as opposed to a sign of warmth. Now I have no way of validating that perception, but I think it would have been so far away from things that they're used to hearing from one man to another that it would have seemed wrong as opposed to welcome.
So might that have been another way of saying everybody's very flawed, even the good guy, even the guy who is going to find the bad guys, even he's flawed because he has some kind of love communication with another man?
I mean, you know, what Edward G. Robinson says, you know, Walter says, you didn't solve the crime because you didn't realize that the criminal was just across the desk from you. And Edward G. Robinson says, closer than that, Walter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not just I love you. It's what precedes that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that must have been a curveball for the original audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it must have been shocking that, but it's also possible that it's an afterglow of Victorian male-to-male expressions, which often look that way also, and aren't necessarily, they are homoerotic but not homosexual. I mean, it's certainly homoerotic. I don't think you can avoid that. He's closer to Keyes than he is to anybody in the movie.
Hey,
Yeah.
Art.
Yeah.
Hey, Art. But you know, it's when you say that, it reminds me of how many times Walter lit Keyes' cigar because
Yes.
he's going to light his cigar.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
He
What
does.
does that mean
Lights the cigar, yeah. What do you make of that? I mean,
I mean, along with this homoeroticism, it could also be an expression of that love. You know, I'm out there, but
is it an act of friendship or subservience or symbolic, or how do they get away with it? I mean, they were lucky, and whoever it was who was at the Hayes office.
Yeah.
I mean, it is very yes, the lighting of the cigar. I mean, or is this just us?
I don't know.
Because another way to look at it is, I wish we could go back and verify, but another way to look at it is if that was not shocking, if it was just okay that they were suggesting that these two men had a very close hetero friendship,
right,
then it would really be further emphasizing the greed and the betrayal. Maybe that's all it was.
Yes. And I think part of the attraction for Walter is the betrayal. That he said, I'm going to make the big score. I'm going to betray my only friend. Cool. Shelley Arrington can't raise her hand, but she had a question. Shelley, can you?
Yes, back to a much earlier comment about how he was, someone asked, why was he what was he trying to do between Lola and Zaretti?
Yeah.
And you, Art, said that he was in love with Lola because of her innocence and so forth. The thing is that an hour before, he had planned to blame the whole thing on Zaretti, and then that would have allowed him to have Lola. But the reason that he blows it is he goes in to tell her the whole plot, and so she shoots him. So I wondered when he was doing that, why is it that he's explaining everything to her before it's accomplished? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, the whole thing didn't make any sense, but that especially didn't.
Yeah. I'm going to say one of the things about all of these film noir movies is because they are sort of perverse in many ways, often the plots don't make sense. And you're just carried along by the sheer vigor of what's going on. And you're not given time to think about it. We're going to see that especially with Vertigo. But this is intentional to just rush you through. But here's someone, I think, to go back to, to what Laurie said. He enjoys betraying Keyes. It's the ultimate in self-expression, but he's attracted to Lola because she's innocent and he's not.
Right. That's right.
So that's part of it. And to have a protagonist who's not innocent was also a middle-class person who's not innocent, not a gangster, an ordinary person, an insurance salesman who's not innocent. That was a breakthrough in the making of these films. And it's what the French notice is, what is this? And so that was, it is a revolutionary film in that way. But I do think, he betrays Keyes, and that feels in some way good to him.
And so he's announcing it to what's her name? To Barbara Stanwyck?
To Phyllis.
To Phyllis, yeah. Well, I mean, I actually found the thing completely enjoyable, hugely stylized. Really, the filming, the cinematography was fabulous, and I really got a kick out of it. And most of it didn't make any sense. The dialogue made no sense at all.
Yeah, I think.
But that, I thought, why is he blowing this now when he has the perfect way to do this? Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Because I need to go at 12.
Sure.
What's the next movie?
Sunset Boulevard.
Okay, thank you.
Next movie is Sunset Boulevard, which is also perverse. So.
And Shelley, the most confusing movie I've ever seen was The Big Sleep. I think this one is easy.
Yeah, Big Sleep, yes.
Double Indemnity is easy.
William Faulkner, who also contributed with Chandler to The Big Sleep. Can you imagine? They wrote the screenplay, William Faulkner and and Raymond Chandler. And Faulkner said, well, who's this guy who shoots this other guy? And Faulkner says, damned if I know. So you're not the only person who was confused. The screenwriters were confused. But I think that has to do with expressing the chaos of the world in a world in which Hollywood wants tidy films, tidy stories. You suddenly have stories that are untidy, really untidy.
I think we have time for one more question if someone has something. Lou, you're muted. Unmute yourself, sir. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the most interesting part of this story is what is going on in the mind of the protagonist. And when we stop being rational, cerebral, really aware of our cognitive abilities and using them, and when we relinquish those to passion. And you know, when Stanwyck and McMurray first met, he was passionate, but then very reserved because it kicked in that she was a femme fatale. Yeah. And then later on, when he got information, you know, he planned this thing so down to the last detail. He was really using his cognitive abilities. And then at the end, after Lola had informed him of some things about the lady, then he totally became passionate again. It was passion. He wanted to kill. Yeah. And he knew that he would die. He knew he would get into trouble. So I just find this so interesting because all of us, we're humans and we have passions and we have rationality. And where is the tipping point? And I just found that absolutely fascinating. Would you care to
last question to you, Lou. Why do we want them to get away when the car won't start?
Passion.
Yeah. Are we identifying with them?
Yeah. Well, that's true. I identified with the protagonist all the way through.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Art, thank you. We'll see you next week.
All right. Everybody next week for Sunset Boulevard, another perverse film.
All right, goodbye.
Bye-bye.